Hello and welcome to the Scoreboard Podcast. I'm your host, Boord of Jets X Factor, the home of the best New York Jets content on the internet. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Subscribe to jetsxfactor.com, discount code 80, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Please let me know if you can hear me because, again, I was having major microphone issues. I had to switch off my microphone. I'm just using my headphones. My computer decided to update right when I was supposed to go live, and then it wasn't picking up my microphone, so I had to switch to a different laptop. I don't have the microphone set up with it. I apologize. Okay, with that being said, I was not actually going to come live this week because I was so disgusted by what I saw on Sunday. But then I had a couple of people with a nod to Hitchhiker's Pie, a couple of people on a particular Discord server that I'm a part of who asked me if I'm going to be running a podcast this week. And so I decided, okay, I'm not going to be I guess just come from a fan perspective, and I will actually run a podcast. So here I am. Okay, so I titled this podcast, It's Over. And the photo that I put in the thumbnail was a picture of Jets fans with a bag over their head reading Jets fan in hiding. Because that's kind of what I felt like, and what I felt like progressively with every game this season. You know, perhaps I should completely divorce my fandom from what I do as a writer and as an analyst. But ultimately, I'm running a Jets X Factor podcast. It's called Jets X Factor. There's a very good chance that the people who write for Jets X Factor are Jets fans. And so I am a Jets fan. And with every subsequent humiliating defeat, I have found myself shrinking further and further into a corner, being more and more just not just disgusted, but utterly mortified to be a fan of this team. And I honestly don't ever quite remember feeling like this before to this extent. Maybe it's because I just haven't been associated with fans of other teams so much before the last couple of years. But this is a whole different level of I mean, I can't think of another word for it except like mortification, humiliation. I don't know what else to call it for this Jets team. I mean, and to a certain extent, though, you have to say maybe they're reaping what they sowed. They're getting a little bit of what they deserved. I wrote an article a couple of days ago talking about how, in a way, the Jets tried to take a shortcut to success, just like other teams have in recent years, getting the quarterback, trying to get some veteran pieces, go on a run. Look, obviously it worked for the Bucs and the Rams in back-to-back seasons. And so it's kind of, it's tempting to go down that route. But honestly, in the past, it hasn't worked that often. And the Jets tried it. And I mean, it looks, by every indication, it looks like it failed. Now, the level to which it failed is what makes it so humiliating. Okay, so you got Aaron Rodgers, you tried to go on a run. Let's say it doesn't work. Okay, you go 9-8. You miss the playoffs by a game, or you make the playoffs and you go a first round exit. Certainly it's disappointing, but it's not it's not shameful. This is almost worse than what happened to the Broncos a few years ago. In 2022, the Broncos got Russell Wilson. They thought they were going to make this big run. They get Russell Wilson. They go 5-12. Russell goes 4-11 as a starter. After one more year, they were more decent last year, but still not great. They cut bait with Wilson and just ate, I think it was $89 million in cap hit. But this is worse. Just because the level of hype surrounding this Jets team was a lot higher than that Broncos team. And just the way it's going is just, again, it's hard to put into words. And so when I say it's over, I don't mean that it's technically over. If you look at the betting lines, the Jets are at plus 210 according to DraftKings to make the playoffs. It's an implied odds of somewhere close to 32.8%, 33%. NFL.com has them at around 34%. ESPN Analytics, as Rich Cimini said, Mr. Analytics must be a Jets fan because for some reason they have them at 47%. There is no way that this team basically has a 50-50 shot at making the playoffs. But look, about a third sounds about right. It's not completely over, particularly because, again, the AFC is not very strong, surprisingly weak. So it's not over. But if this Jets team that we've seen until now keeps showing up, not only will they not make the playoffs, but they could lose more games than they did the last 2 seasons, which is, I mean, an incredible prospect. And the question has been going around a lot. Did the Jets get worse with Aaron Rodgers than they were with Zach Wilson? And while it's hard to say that, there are definitely certain aspects that make it feel like it. Now, the defensive side of the ball is one thing. The Jets did decimate their defense in their own right by getting rid of 3 of their top 4 pressure getters of last season. So that's a different story. And obviously against Pittsburgh, they were down by the end of the game. They were down their top two of their top 3 corners, both of their starting safeties. It was a disaster. But I'm saying the defense is one thing. But just on the offensive side of the football, as bad as Zach Wilson was, miscommunication wasn't necessarily as big of an issue because the Jets' offense was so simple. Now, is that a good thing? No. But, and again, I'm trying to grasp at straws here because I don't really think the Jets were better off with Zach Wilson. But the fact that they have scored the same exact number of points through 7 games this year that they did through 7 games last year is, I mean, it's unthinkable. It's really unthinkable. It's unbelievable. And it's just, looking at that, it just feels like there's no hope ahead. Now, I know Hitchhiker's Pie you mentioned. The Jets have the 3rd easiest remaining schedule per DVOA. Now, for other fans who don't necessarily read the site or things like that, DVOA stands for Defense Adjusted Value Over Average, and it's basically an efficiency metric. It compares your team's production to the league average, but adjusted for opponent and game context. So garbage time gets filtered out. You get more credit if you do well against a bad opponent, a good opponent than a bad opponent, and you get less credit. You get blame. You get dinged more if you perform poorly against a bad opponent than a good opponent. So it's a little bit more, it's a lot more balanced. And it also, again, by filtering out garbage time, considering game context, it's a very good team measurement. It's not perfect. There's no perfect statistic, but it's one of the best pure team measurements of play that there is out there. And again, so the Jets have the 3rd easiest remaining schedule per DVOA, and the AFC is generally quite weak. So there's an avenue, but it seems particularly small and unlikely to pan given everything else. And that's exactly the point. Rodgers can talk about optimism and tuning out the media. I mean, come on. He kind of invites all the media scrutiny and then tells everyone else to tune it out. But, tuning out the media and the power of belief, and Quincy Williams could talk about being 1-0 each week and things like that. We all know what's up. This Jets team is in hot water. And yes, their schedule's the 30th easiest remaining per DVOA. I believe after last week, it was actually the easiest remaining per DVOA. And so it just doesn't match up. Like, so what that they have the easiest schedule per DVOA? What's their own DVOA ranking? I'm certain it's not very good. I haven't even checked it. I think it was 21st going into this week. So I'm sure it's worse by now, especially given all the amount of points and the offense they gave up to Pittsburgh. And so it's just, again, as I said, it's over. Maybe it's not statistically over. Maybe it's not an old technicality over, but it's over. Again, I mean, look, the Mets were 11.5 games out of first place in May, and they came back and made the playoffs in the last game of the season and made it to the NLCS. So, again, we've seen teams turn it around before, but this just did not look like a team that's prepared to turn it around. Every time you say, but this needs to get better, but that they just managed to make it worse. And now they really got blown out. Like, until now, you could say, okay, they lost to San Francisco, whatever, as much as they're not playing great. You can make excuses for it, bad matchup, whatever. You could, the other games were close. They didn't get blown out by anything. They played fairly well against Buffalo. And so you could make excuses for them. But not only did they lose to Pittsburgh, they got decimated by Pittsburgh. And the thing about what has happened with Jeff Ulbrich that is very strange in a way is that they've actually come out fairly strong. I mean, they've scored 32 points in the first half over the last 2 weeks. It's a little misleading because of the Hail Mary to Allen Lazard. But again, they had some good drives. Again, they scored 15 points against Pittsburgh in the first half. They look decent offensively. Obviously, Rodgers threw a terrible interception that led to a touchdown drive to make it 15-13 instead of what would have been 15-6 with the Jets driving. But ultimately, they were leading at the half. Their offense looked fairly efficient. They had those 2 touchdown drives. They had a 13-yard touchdown to to Brees. They had a wide open touchdown to Tyler Conklin. 2-point conversion, obviously on a ridiculous leaping call, but nonetheless, 2-point conversion. And so, again, they looked okay in the first half. And then in the last 2 weeks, they have combined for 3 points in the second half. It's just, how do you even do that? Like, what does that even mean? Like under Hackett and under Saleh, what was happening is the Jets were starting out really slowly. You saw they were losing 17-0 to Minnesota before you could even blink an eye. But then they would adjust at least somewhat. They started going up tempo, things like that, and they started scoring at least somewhat, and they had a chance to win the game at the end. But now, and technically they had the chance to win last week too. But now it's just like, they go completely dead. Like, I guess they come out with one game plan and have no other options. Like, you could see it this week. Pittsburgh basically saw that the Jets' game plan was to come out with quick passes. So they stopped even trying to pass rush, and they would just start jumping and deflecting balls. Jets had no answer to it. Again, you have to adjust in some way. You have to change up what you're doing. Even if Peyton Manning says that halftime adjustments aren't real, you have to then, if you're not making adjustments at halftime, you have to have a game plan that is flexible enough to change given game context. Or to realize that your game plan, but you come in, if you're focusing on one thing, the defense is probably the opponent is probably going to realize and start trying to take that away. You need to have a counterpunch. The Jets clearly have none. And so it's strange how everything flips on its head, and yet it's just all the same. Again, as far as the Pittsburgh game, look, I've been beating up the Jets stars all year, and I will continue to do so. Garrett Wilson, completely unacceptable. 2 drops, including one that goes straight into Steelers' arms. I saw one Jets X Factor writer wrote in our Slack group saying Garrett was afraid. He saw the safety coming. He was afraid to get hit. Garrett Wilson, there's no other word for it. Garrett Wilson is soft. He's like as soft as a receiver as you will see in the NFL. And it's interesting because when Rodgers came in with the Jets, he made a comment. He said that when Davante Adams came into the league, he was 222 pounds. And he, over time, honed his body and got it down to a muscled 208. And he kind of said that Garrett had to do it in the opposite direction. Now, when they asked Garrett Wilson how much he weighs or just about if he gained any weight or muscle in this offseason, he said that he came into the league at 182 and he's now at 187. 187 pounds. Now, again, there are skinny receivers in the NFL who succeed. But it is very obvious from the way Garrett Wilson plays that he is too skinny and also just afraid to take a hit. And he cannot hold on to the ball when he gets hit. It's just disgusting at this point. Like, Garrett Wilson is not a number 1 receiver. Not only that, you have to question yourself, what is he at this point? I know he had a pretty good game against Buffalo, but even then, couldn't come up with either of those 2 balls in the end zone. You want to be a great receiver in this league, you got to catch at least one of those balls. And it's not just those balls. It's a repeated theme over the years. Whenever a catch is difficult, more often than not, Garrett Wilson will not come up with the catch. And I don't care. Look, PFF has him with better contested catch stats this year. They have him at 50%, I think 7 for 14, when he's been at like 32% for his first 2 seasons. It's not even about contested catches. It's about catching the ball when you know you're going to get a hit. It's about holding on to the ball when it's not 100% accurate. Justin Jefferson is the king of this. Justin Jefferson makes his quarterback look good by catching anything that comes within his radius. Again, I know Garrett Wilson's not Justin Jefferson. Jefferson was 100% right when he told the media that defenses defend him totally differently than Garrett Wilson. The reason they do is because Justin Jefferson is head and shoulders as a receiver above Garrett Wilson. And ordinarily, that wouldn't necessarily be an insult because a player could still be a top, 5 to 10 receiver and be significantly worse than Justin Jefferson. But Garrett Wilson is not a top 10 receiver in the NFL. He may not even be a top 20 receiver in the NFL at this point, if you look around. You look at a guy like Chris Godwin, everyone would have considered him probably better than Chris Godwin coming into the season. Can you say so? Can you really say that he's better than Chris Godwin? He certainly wasn't this year, but even if you look at Godwin's track record compared to Wilson's, I don't think so. You look at, I think pretty much every team's number 1 receiver is superior to Garrett Wilson. Look at Malik Neighbors. Neighbors, I think, is not so much bigger than Garrett Wilson. And I know that they keep spamming him with targets, but the Jets also keep spamming Wilson with targets. Okay, yeah, Neighbors is bigger than Wilson. He's 200 pounds. But, I mean, just look what Neighbors did. He comes into the league. He's literally the only receiving threat on his team. He's got a terrible quarterback. And yet, he's been far more productive than Garrett Wilson has ever been in his career, including as a rookie. I mean, just what can you say about Garrett Wilson? Breece Hall. I know Jets fans are going to say, look, he had 200-yard games over the last 2 weeks. Breece Hall is still not anything close to where he was as a running back over his first 2 seasons. He's not breaking tackles. He's made some people miss in the passing game. But in the run game, he's not breaking tackles. He's been taken down by the ankle countless times this season. And I understand that there have been, he's been dealing with tacklers in the backfield. But again, when you're a running back and you're one-on-one with a defender diving for your legs, I want you to say, if you're Breece Hall and you consider yourself one of the best running backs in the league, you've got to break that tackle. And there were so many times, not just against Pittsburgh, but in every game, where he came within one tackler of at least a 10-yard run, if not a breakaway. And he just couldn't break that tackle. Now, NFL Next Gen Stats gave Breece negative 15 rush yards over expected against Pittsburgh. Second worst of the week for any running back with at least 8 carries. And this is emblematic of Breece's season, even against Buffalo, when I think he had 32 rush yards over expected. He basically posted positive rush yards over expected on only a third of his runs, which was one of the lower marks of the week also. He cannot consistently outperform at all what his blocking gives him. And again, if you can't do that as an NFL running back, you're a jag. You're just a guy. Because statistically speaking, the majority of the time, you can predict how many yards a running back will get on any given run far more by the blocking at the point that they receive the ball than by the name of the running back. That's exactly where this term running backs don't matter comes from. Because in the majority of cases, running backs really do not matter. Breece Hall was looking to prove that he was one of those running backs who did matter. Right? Christian McCaffrey got $19 million per year because he matters. Maybe he doesn't matter $19 million per year. You can debate that. It could be he matters for the 49ers more than he would for a different team. It's hard to know. But Breece Hall is proving this year the opposite. He is proving that he is only capable of doing exactly what his blocking gives him, at least in the run game, and nothing more. And look, running backs who are great receiving threats and not really good running backs, I mean, again, I'm not going to call Breece Hall Rachaad White, but to a certain extent, Rachaad White is like that. Tampa's running back. Can't run the ball to save his life, but is a pretty good receiver out of the backfield. A lot of these really good receiving threat running backs become third down backs. And I'm not saying Breece Hall is a third down back. What I'm saying is he's a thoroughly mediocre back at best as a runner. And, look, he's going to be heading into the final year of his deal this offseason. I kept saying at the time that I figured the Jets would franchise tag him once and then let him go. The way he's played this year doesn't deserve the franchise tag. It just doesn't. We get to Quinnen Williams. Quinnen Williams had a good game against Buffalo, decent game against Pittsburgh. For the season, complete non-factor. Elite run defender last year. Worst PFF run defense grade of his career. And I know, again, I'm not a big fan of PFF grades anyway, but there really isn't much else to evaluate run defense. And it tracks with the eye test. Just not seeing him make these impactful plays that he did in the past. Yeah, he'll have won a game, at least the last couple of games, but not much more than that. He's just not doing it. And for those who say that he's been double-teamed more often, he actually has not. That's what the crazy thing is. He's been double-teamed less than last year. Maybe partially because the Jets have put him on the edge, which is an idiotic idea. But either way, double teams are not the reason Quinnen is not performing. He's just not performing to his standard against double teams. And he's just not performing to his standard, period. This might be the worst season of his career, which is insane for a guy who was an all-pro 2 years ago, Pro Bowl back-to-back seasons, widely acknowledged top 3 defensive tackle in the NFL at worst. What is it? What's going on? Sauce Gardner. Can't pick on him too much. Hasn't really been targeted over the last few weeks. But when he does get targeted, a lot of times it's a big play. I mean, Cortland Sutton had a 29-yard catch against him. I know some of the calls against him against Minnesota were soft, but nonetheless, big pass interference call against George Pickens. Why not try him? Hasn't been the same Sauce Gardner in coverage. Certainly hasn't been the same Sauce Gardner, has been, he keeps regressing in the run game. He went from decent as a rookie to bad last year to a horrific, almost unplayable this year. He looks totally checked out as a tackler. He's like afraid he's going to snap in half. And his angles, for a guy who has really good speed, he's incredibly, it's incredible how many times he gets beaten to the corner. And it's just because of terrible angles in the run game. He just over pursues constantly. This is just, and again, if you get a guy who's been atrocious in the run game and has been maybe okay in coverage, what do you have? Is this a guy worth $30 million per year? I don't think so. I would argue that the Jets should not even talk about long-term extensions with any of their 2022 players. I don't think you can. And I'm not even talking about Aaron Rodgers. I think it's pretty safe to say that Rodgers is cooked at this point. Because basically what we saw in 2022, it was easy to say that it was an anomaly. What we're seeing is basically 2022, but just like 2 steps down. And that's not surprising. Rodgers is almost 41. We hoped it would be different. Maybe fooled ourselves into thinking it would be different. This is the reality. It's not even that much more to say about the game or the Jets or anything. I'll check the comments and everything. But I think the paper bags showing Jets fan in hiding were completely appropriate. It's 100% how I felt after this game. And it's how I feel. And it's how I've felt for 13 years. Get to some of the comments. Christopher, yep, I said it's over. I'll have to look into we just need to play better. Accountability, blah, blah, blah. All talk, no action. And it will never change as long as Woody owns the team. His record speaks. Look, I'm definitely inclined to say that. I am inclined to say that when you cycle through GM after GM, coach after coach, starting quarterback after starting quarterback, high draft pick after high draft pick, and nothing changes, I'm inclined to say that it's institutional rot starting with the owner. The only thing I have to say, as Michael Nania pointed out, is that the Jets were actually pretty successful when Woody first bought the team. And to an extent, Robbie Sabo has said that was kind of Johnson enjoying the fruits of Bill Parcells' labor. And perhaps that was true in 1998. But, or actually Woody bought the team in 1999, I think. It was the year after, right? It was 99 or 2000, one of those, maybe 2000. Maybe the first couple of years. But ultimately, Chad Pennington was drafted after Bill Parcells left. And the Jets made the playoffs under Herman Edwards a bunch of times. Made the playoffs in 2002. Made the playoffs in 2004. Again, those weren't necessarily elite teams. They weren't. But again, that 2014 was pretty good. They ran into they came within a missed field goal in overtime, actually 2 missed field goals, of making it to the AFC Championship game. It was a talented team. 2005, it falls apart. 2006, they bring in Mangini. You have a rejuvenated Chad Pennington, and he wasn't elite. He had 17 touchdowns, 16 interceptions. But team no one expected to do anything, had a very easy schedule, but again, finished, I think it was 10-6. Got blown out in the first round of the playoffs, but still made the playoffs. Future looked bright. 2007, everything fell apart. Chad got hurt. bunch of breakdowns. 08, obviously they got Brett Favre. Start out 8-3. Things look pretty good. And as Favre proved the next year, he still had stuff left in the tank. He wasn't completely done. Wasn't like a Rodgers situation. He still had an arm. If he hadn't gotten hurt, that Jets team probably would have been a playoff team. Then you have the Rex years. Again, Mark Sanchez was a bust. Any Jets fan who says differently is revising history. I think Sanchez had at least 18 interceptions in 3 of his, it was 5 years with the Jets? 9 to 13? I think so. 3 of his 5 years, he had at least 18 interceptions. And one of those seasons, I think he missed the whole year. So really 3 of 4. Had 27 turnovers as a rookie. Sanchez kind of moseyed his way along behind the Jets to those 2 AFC Championship games. He had 100 yards passing against the Chargers. I know his DVOA in those games were pretty good. Doesn't pass the smell test. Doesn't, if you watched him play. Totally doesn't pass it. So, again, from 1999 to 2010, the Jets fielded multiple playoff teams. They were competitive more often than not. I had perhaps the misfortune of becoming a fan during that time. The Jets made the playoffs 4 out of my first 7 years as a fan. And so I thought they'd be competitive. And now for 13 years, they just haven't been, except for 2015. Is it Woody? I mean, even though they had that initial success, you have to wonder, just like, is it hiring? Is it just demanding things? Like, what's going on? I would assume he's just hiring the wrong people. I don't know. But I'm going to guess it will never change as long as Woody Johnson is the owner. Let's see. Look, it ain't over till it's over. That's true. Again, they have a 33% chance of making the playoffs. Fans are going to continue to go to the games, probably at a pretty low rate because MetLife attendance isn't great, even when the Jets are good. But, fans will continue to turn on the games, root for them, continue to hope in a miracle. But again, if you're pragmatic, if you're realistic, it looks over. Sauce is the most overrated corner in NFL history. G.J. Reed is better. Michael Carter II is better. Eccles is better. Sauce is the 4th best corner on this roster. Extend D.J. Reed. Trade Sauce for 2 second-round picks. Okay, I'm not even going to deign to respond to that. We'll all gel at the right time. Be patient. I was patient in week 4 when they lost to Denver, as upset as I was. I was patient in week 5 when they lost to the 5-0 Vikings, or 4-0 Vikings. I got less patient when they lost to the Bills. And at this point, this level, being patient with this team is just delusional. This is what this team is. Maybe they'll beat the Patriots this week. Just get a little, again, if they lost the Patriots, it would just be almost fitting. Maybe then they would sell off at the deadline. They won't, but they should. Maybe they'll beat the Patriots, get some semblance of hope. But perhaps it's appropriate that they play the Texans the following game. Because even if they beat the Patriots, that Texans game will show them exactly who they are, which is a bad team. Get it out, I agree. I mean, look, I think I deluded myself, this starving Jets fan. Just thinking we'll get this one magical season. When I first joined Jets X Factor, I wrote an article talking about what would Jets fans trade for one championship. And I gave different scenarios, but I've always felt as a Jets fan that I would trade 20 or more years of futility for one championship. And it's not really an exaggeration because the Jets are close to 20 years of, they're getting closer to 20 years of futility now. I would take that one time going all the way and not being competitive, not even being remotely competitive for 20 years. And that was what my thought was for this year. Just get that one ring. And I don't care if the Jets are never good again in my lifetime because I'll have the sweetness of that one ring. Maybe that's a all or nothing fallacy. It's the way I feel. It's not over, Jets fans. Again, as I said, it's not completely over. Yeah, the schedule's easy. But again, you don't think that the Jets who are saying their schedule is easy, that all those teams are pointing to the Jets on their schedule and saying easy win? When you're a bad team, an easy schedule isn't easy. It's just reality. Yeah, that we'll get it together, said no Jets fan that has been a fan more than 10 years. Exactly. I mean, if you've been a fan for less than 10 years, you certainly don't think they're going to get it together. I mean, we have several Jets X Factor people who have not been Jets fans, have never seen the Jets make the playoffs. I mean, you guys know Connor Long. Connor said he doesn't even think that he'll ever see the Jets make the playoffs in his lifetime. He's 13 years old. Maybe that sounds like an exaggeration, but it certainly doesn't feel like one. We just need a soft game to boost our confidence. That was week 3 against the Patriots. And look what the Jets have done since then. I'm just saying the Jets are going to blow out the Patriots and everyone's going to feel much better next week. First of all, I don't think they're going to blow them out. I just don't. Not the way we've been seeing them play. Maybe they could get to Drake May like they did to Jacoby Brissett. Look, depends who's in and who's out. If Reed and Carter are out again and Tony Adams, you don't think May can pick them apart like he picked apart, like he played against Jacksonville? I don't know. I don't think this is an elite defense. I don't even think it's a good defense. But even if they do blow out the Patriots, they're playing the Texans a few days later. And whatever confidence comes out from beating the Patriots, if they do, will disappear against the Texans. And I don't even think the Texans are that good necessarily. CJ Stroud hasn't been elite this year. I know he carved up the Patriots. It was mediocre against the Packers. A lot of mediocre games this year. Vikings made him look like an idiot. I think he was hailed as the second coming of Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes before he completely deserved it. Again, I'm not saying CJ Stroud isn't a good quarterback or he won't be an elite quarterback. I'm just saying I don't think he's played like an elite quarterback. Whatever the numbers say. But I'm just saying purely as, again, the eye test on him. If the Jets had the defense from last year, I would actually, again, I came into the season, I was very confident the Jets were going to beat the Texans because I felt like what their defense did to him last year, they could do again very easily. Not now. I mean, look, I'm not going to call any Jets fan who's hopeful completely delusional. There's always some hope. Rodgers once said he started out 4-6 and they won out the rest of the year. There's just no reason to believe that this is going to happen. They've only played 7 games. The players are too good to be bad for long. Just be patient, dare I say, relax. I would say that. The problem is problems with that. First of all, it is very fair to say that this may just be who Rodgers is. We saw it in 20. It is very fair. You can't say he's too good to say that he's better than he's playing. That just may be what he is. And it takes a level of delusion not to recognize that. Tyron Smith is cooked. His loss of athleticism is not coming back. He looks just as bad as Mekhi Becton did last year. Unless they switch it in and look, I'm not saying Olo's going to be great. He certainly played terribly at right tackle, but probably better off just putting Olo there than trotting out a guy who can't even get back into his stance far enough to stop an edge rusher without getting his hand on him. What we're seeing from Garrett isn't that different from what we saw last year. People just excused it. Shouldn't be excused anymore. Davante Adams, yeah, maybe he'll he and Rodgers will get back on the same page and it'll be great. But the stats all showed that Davante was slowing down. Look, he still looks like an elite route runner. He still has that quickness. But if he doesn't have the speed anymore, he's never going to be more than a quick play threat, which is what DeAndre Hopkins is at this point for the most part. I'm not saying they're a bad player. They're just not elite anymore. Not a number 1 receiver anymore. Okay, it could be Davante is. We'll see. Yeah, and I still think his route running is there. You can see it. Sauce? Who knows? Quinn Williams? Who knows? I would think he'd be too good. I was patient. But you realize this week is week 8. We're essentially at the midway point through the season after this game. Jets will be more than halfway through the season by the time next week ends. It's getting late early. New England next week, win. Arizona November 10th, win. Versus Indy toss-up. Seattle toss-up. Then Miami, Jacksonville, Rams, Buffalo, and then Miami again. That could be 4-1 to close out the year. I mean, talk about that's almost optimistic to the point of blindness. You would have said that coming into the season. Arizona just beat the Chargers. Why won't Arizona beat the Jets? I know their defense stinks. The fact that Indy is a toss-up, especially if they're still playing Anthony Richardson at that point, just tells you where the Jets are. I don't know why everyone's overlooking Miami. With Tua back, they're going to be at least competitive again. Okay, Jacksonville stinks. But so do the Jets. Why do we think we're going to beat Buffalo on the road, which we haven't the last 2 years, if we couldn't beat them at home? I could more easily read into that. Let's see how many games there are. You skipped the Texans, but fine. So we're 2-5 right now. That's 7 games. We have 10 games left. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you skipped the Texans. So let's go through it. New England. Let's say they beat New England. Fine. We'll give them the New England game. Let's even give them Arizona. Let's even give them Indy. 5 and 6, assuming they lose they beat the Texans. There is no reason to think they can beat Seattle. There is no reason to think that they can beat Miami with Tua Tagovailoa, particularly considering how Miami obliterated them last season. So that would make them 5 and 8, which, by the way, was exactly the record last year after 13 games. Let's say we give them Jacksonville, 6 and 8. Why do you think they're going to beat the Rams? The Rams will be healthier by then. Still have Matthew Stafford. I know they're trying to trade Cooper Kupp. Let's even give them that, 7 and 8. Buffalo and Miami. Say if they can beat those two teams to have a chance at making the playoffs. There is no reason to believe that they can beat both of those teams. So even if we're just being slightly charitable, the Jets will finish the season with a maximum of 8 wins. I just don't see how you can read with anything other than green-colored glasses that don't see any other color. I just don't know how you can say that this team has a chance. Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, look, you've been through this for 30 years. The Jets don't ever get it together. I've been through it, let's see, 2004? Yeah, this is my 21st year. They only lost due to injuries. Will be better with Reddick. Yeah, you would say that if it was just the defense that fell apart, but the offense fell apart too. And by the way, we still don't have it. As far as I know, we still don't have any updates on AVT or Tony Adams. Reed, Carter could definitely be out. Could be just as injured. Stop using injuries as an excuse, especially when the part of the ball that's still very healthy is the one that's carrying the losses. Often things can look terrible when you watch only your own team and they're losing, but think about how much Jacksonville and Miami fans are feeling right now with far worse rosters. I don't necessarily think Miami's roster is so much worse. And also, is looking at the dregs of the NFL supposed to, and seeing that we're in the same boat, supposed to be a comfort? I mean, I don't just watch the Jets. I've been watching a lot of football this year. Jets is among the ugliest that you ever watch. The only teams that have really been consistently uglier, the only teams in the AFC who the Jets are ahead of, are the Browns, Titans, Jaguars, and Patriots. And their 2 wins have come against 2 of those teams, which means the Jets are closer to 0-7 than they are to any sort of competitive football. Jets fans are so volatile. Just let it play out and let's support our team like a good game base. People are tired of losing. You know, another article I wrote when I first joined Jets X Factor for a few months was about why people continue to root for teams that lose. And I didn't do a whole psychological test and experiment and all that. But from the research I've done, sports is largely about identity. You identify with your team, you wear their colors, you scream for them, right? Who wants their identity tied up with something so miserable? That's what I was saying about wearing a paper bag over my head and saying Jets fan in hiding. That's what I feel like. I don't want to identify with this team. Why would I? Who wants to identify with such a team? Do you want to be a loser? Be associated with losing constantly? Brian, thanks for joining. Jets probably have to go 6-4 from here on out to have a shot, 7-3 to have a better than 50-50 shot. It's a tough ask, though not impossible. Look, again, implied odds, 32 to 34%, something like that. That's not impossible. But is it likely, considering what we've seen from this Jets team so far? Just seen trash. It is pretty funny that Roger says, tune out the media, but make sure you tune in when I go on McAfee every week. Well said. Yep. Okay. I didn't realize what you were saying. No, that's mean. They've made all the moves we wanted them to. When Joe couldn't, Woody stepped in. They've lost most of their games by only 1 score. Everyone chill out. No, I will not chill out. Most NFL games come within 1 score. And if you're a good team, you'll be able to win some games by more than 1 score. Right? That's what Rodgers told Saleh. You could see that reading his lips, regardless of the implications of him pushing him. He said 2-score lead. They had talked about it. Rodgers had talked about it in the offseason. Is that the only time the whole season the Jets have had a 2-score lead against the Patriots? No, they had a 2-score lead against Pittsburgh, 15-6. Look where that got them. Sorry. Chilling out. No. The Jets have only lost versus good teams and beaten bad teams. Lost versus San Francisco, 1 point. Lost to Denver, lost 1 score versus Minnesota, lost by 3 versus Buffalo. Only really bad loss versus Pittsburgh. It doesn't matter. A loss is a loss at this point. If they had won one of those games, even just beaten Denver, maybe things would look different. But being 2-5 means I don't always ascribe to what Bill Parcells said. You are what your record says you are. I think it's more complicated than that. But the Jets' record matches what their performance on the field has been, regardless of how each individual game has gone. Do you watch this team and think this is a team that's had a few bad breaks, but is a good team? Or do you watch this team and think this is a dysfunctional team that is lucky to have won 2 games against terrible quarterbacks? If they continue to beat bad teams and lose to good teams, they'll go 6-4. Depends what you call a bad team. I mean, look, again, the only teams on their schedule that I think are like, you could say that before the game, the Jets will definitely win. And even that, I mean, look, the Jets have lost the worst team to worse teams before, are New England and Jacksonville. And I could argue that with Devontae getting in sync with the offense, beating a good team is well within reach. Plus, the secondary will get healthy. Look, Michael Carter II has a back injury. And even if he gets better from that back injury, he's been in and out of games all season with that high ankle sprain. Saleh had said at the beginning of the year it was going to be something that was going to linger all year. Carter is not reliable to be in the game at any given time. Look, if you just have Isaiah Oliver in the slot, it's not the end of the world. But again, DJ Reed, I think, was very overrated before. Again, he gave up 70 yards to the Bills, and who were the Bills receivers? He gave up to Mac Hollins. I think Reed, what happened against Buffalo was a more accurate reflection of what could have happened in other games. I thought that last year too. He's one of the luckier corners in the NFL in terms of the number of times he's beaten deep and the throw isn't accurate. And then we saw what started to happen last year, where he started to get beaten deep because finally quarterbacks just were on target with throws that had previously been off target. He gets beat deep a lot, DJ Reed. I'm not saying that beating a good team isn't within reach. I'm not saying that this team will never win a good game, although they may not. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying that look at the likelihood. Look at the chances. Look what they've put on the field so far. Sometimes you try and it doesn't work out, but Woody can't will. If he does nothing, he's cheap. If he does something, you're saying he can't win. He does something, he's meddling. Everyone wanted Saleh gone, he fired him. Look, I don't disagree. My biggest gripe with Saleh, with firing Saleh, is he should have done it he should have done it in the offseason, if not the previous offseason. But my issue with Woody is not so much the moves he did or didn't make this particular season, or Douglas didn't make. It's more of an institutional issue of hiring in particular, and possibly also the keeping the team president and the scouts, some player personnel people. We don't know all the names of the people behind the scenes who might have been in this with the Jets for 20 plus years. I'm not talking about Woody and any particular thing he did or didn't do. I'm talking about Woody in terms of who he's hired and who he's allowed them to hire. That's where I think it starts. Everyone wanted Rodgers, Devontae, and Reddick. Woody stepped in and made it happen. I did not particularly want Rodgers, to be honest. I certainly did not want Devontae after they lost to the Bills. If they had gotten him a week earlier, or maybe. Once they lost to the Bills, I was like, this thing's going off the rails. I don't think it's a good idea to give up assets now. And I certainly did not want Hassan Reddick. Wanted him in the building once he came. Did not want to trade for him. I was upset that they traded for Reddick and then let John Franklin Myers go. Philosophically, as a defense, it didn't make sense. They played JFM specifically on rundowns. And now they replace him with a guy who's pass rusher only? Makes a lot of sense. With Devontae in-house, they don't need Wilson to be the number one anymore. Who got more targets against Pittsburgh? Yes, I know it was Devontae's first game with the Jets. And yes, they don't need Wilson to be number one anymore, but ultimately he's still going to get these targets. He's still the one who got that target down the left sideline. Rodgers is going to try to throw to his open, although he missed an incredible number of people who were open. Just didn't throw the ball. Been doing it all season. But Garrett Wilson was open on that play, and he just didn't catch it. Hey, Connor, thanks for joining. Sorry you have to listen to this. Such a dismal. Now, you're mad that he made a 50-yard play but didn't score. Who are you talking about, Brees? Did you even listen to what I said? Pittsburgh is a very tough team to run against, but Brees really tore their linebackers and defensive backs a new one. Brees's expected yards per carry against Pittsburgh was 4.9. His actual yards per carry was 3.2. Don't tell me about what Pittsburgh's defense does or doesn't do. Tell me about the individual plays. Brees cannot cannot break an ankle tackle to save his life at this point in the running game. I'm not denying he made good plays as a receiver. Had a couple good plays against Buffalo, although why he didn't score on that play was beyond me. As I said, I think he's probably injured at this point, based on the GPS numbers. This is not an elite running back. It's a good receiving back who runs at a below average rate. This Sunday, the streak begins. The Jets are going on a crazy run. Hey, Rivka, look, hope springs eternal. It's why we follow sports. Otherwise, you would only have Chiefs fans, 49ers fans. But again, there's a fine line between optimism and green-colored glasses that don't see any other color. Brees was one of the bright spots. Again, what I look for in Brees Hall is not so much, and again, he made some really good plays in the passing game, so that I'm not questioning. What I look for in Brees Hall, as a runner in particular, as a rusher, is can he create on his own? Can he do beyond what his blocking is doing? And he is doing the opposite this season, even against Buffalo. He is consistently not taking what his blocking is giving him. Whether it's bad vision, whether it's getting tackled by that one guy coming in. I'm sorry, when Rasul Douglas comes in and you have great blocking in front of you, you've got to break that tackle. You can't call yourself a good running back and not break that tackle. Otherwise, you're Devin Singletary. I'm sorry. Look, there was no one who was a bigger proponent, a bigger Brees Hall fan before this season than I was. Might have been what Sauce was referring to even. I was as big a Brees fan out there as there is. I thought he was going to be the best back in the NFL, the best player on the Jets. I picked him for the Offensive Player of the Year in the NFL. And to see him fall so far of that, to look like a shell of his former self, to look like a guy who can't break a tackle, can't make anyone miss. That's what I'm seeing. Quentin Williams plays hard every play. He's one of the top players in his position. You know who else played hard every play? Ryan Fitzpatrick. Not enough. Sauce is a lockdown corner. I'd take him over any other quarterback in our division. I'd take Christian Benford over him at this point. At least with what we've seen from Sauce right now. Look, again, I'm a big Sauce fan. He's not playing up to standard this year. I think if DJ Reed is there last night, some of those Russell Wilson moon balls would have been picks rather than successful completions. I don't think they would have been picks because DJ Reed rarely picks off a ball. I think he has one pick each in the last 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe he had one more. But I do think, I remember thinking when Eccles gave up that first long completion to Pickens, I remember thinking that if it was DJ Reed there, he would have broken up the ball. Even though Reed is 5'9", he is very good at playing through the hands. It's one thing that Sauce and DJ Reed are generally good at. And so I do think that if Reed had been out there, they would have been more successful against Pickens. But that begs the question of why on earth they did not put Sauce Gardner on Pickens. It's one thing to play your sides of the field when you have another really good corner on the other side. When the other team has one good receiver and you are playing, I don't know, Brandon Eccles, Kendall Sheffield at some point. Why on earth don't you just have Sauce Gardner mirror their one good receiver? You're right, he's saving his career. He doesn't want to tackle. I'm sorry, you cannot play any position in the defensive position in the NFL and refuse to tackle. Everyone looks bad whenever you're decimated with injuries in the secondary. To an extent, it's true. But they looked bad before they had that level of injuries. And again, a lot of Jets fans here want Brandon Eccles to be their starting outside cornerback next season. I hope you're changing your mind after what you saw in this game. Brandon Eccles is a very opportunistic player, but he is not a good cornerback. He's good, maybe number 4, although I used to wonder why he was ahead of Bryce Hall because I think Hall's a better player. But he is not a starting cornerback in the NFL. Cooked is going too far. I think that implies he's done. He hasn't played at a top 5 to 10 level, but he's still above average and he can still make ridiculous throws. He just needs better protection. I'll agree with one of your 3 statements. He can still make ridiculous throws. He can. He is not above average. He is playing like a bottom 5 quarterback in the NFL. And in terms of better protection, I am sorry. First of all, his protection has not been as bad as everyone thinks. His sack against Pittsburgh was literally his own fault. He ran straight into the sack. Yes, he's been knocked down. A lot of his pressures have been knockdowns. But his pressure rate is not worse than the NFL average. And when Tom Brady was 40 years old, he was less mobile than Rodgers is now. And yet he was so quick in his decision-making that it didn't even matter. He was always One of the least, if not the least, sack quarterback in the NFL. He had an incredibly low pressure to sack rate, even though he had zero mobility. Chris, it's over for us. I mean, that's what I said. Just so hard to believe he was 1 year removed from an MVP campaign if you don't count last year being injured. First of all, he's a year older, but second of all, Peyton Manning literally went in the middle of a season, and he was younger, a few years younger than Rodgers. He literally went from the first half of the 2014 season playing at an MVP level to the second half of the season being totally washed. It was incredible that he even came back for 2015, and then you could see what he was. Now, Rodgers is not Peyton Manning from 2015. He still has his arm strength. But quarterbacks at this age, any player at this age, can fall off rapidly. I mean, look, Tyron Smith was a second-team All-Pro last year. His tape from last year is still elite. And now this year, he is totally cooked. A lot of star players, but seem to have no team. I mean, you had other teams that are bad, but you have individual players performing very well. This year, it's kind of both. You have a lot of players who are supposed to be good not performing well, and you don't have a team. They don't throw it at him because he covers a receiver so well. I'm not disputing that. Yeah, they don't target him a lot, except that Titans game when Sauce was atrocious in that game. And frankly, he could have also given up 2 more touchdowns and been called for 2 or 3 more penalties. He was terrible against the Titans. The Titans, for gosh sakes. Okay? Yes, he hasn't been targeted very often. He had a bad pass interference penalty against Pittsburgh. He gave him a 29-yard catch to Cortland Sutton. He's not being targeted a lot, but that's just because they find more. They see that they can have success on the other side. They pick on DJ Reed because they see that DJ Reed is beaten a lot. He just gets lucky. That doesn't mean Sauce's coverage has been elite. And even when you're covering at a solid rate, first of all, Sauce's yards per target are among the worst in the NFL, which means when he does get beat, he's beaten badly and for deep throws. And that's another big issue with your supposedly top corner. I think his yards per target ranks like 73rd out of 82 qualified corners. It's pretty incredibly bad. And also, when you have a cornerback who maybe is still playing above average, if not elite, but above average in coverage, but can't tackle, and his run defense is as bad as Sauce's, you have a below average cornerback as a player, a complete player. Can Haason Reddick coach, kick, and pass protect? Exactly. I mean, it remains to be seen if he can even pass rush. The problem with Johnson is he is addicted to Twitter on the New York Post back page. He follows what the fan and media think and just reacts. I mean, it kind of did feel like that. It has felt like that in the past. But I don't think who he hires is based on what the fans and media think. Maybe it is. Look, fans and media were thrilled with the Robert Saleh hire, so maybe it is. I think he's just incompetent at hiring. I agree with everything you have said. Been a fan since I was in high school in '63. I'm 79 and played a lot of football. Woody Johnson chases sugar highs. I mean, that was kind of what trading for Davante Adams was. What would you do differently than Woody? He's trying everything he can to win. Look, I'm not the one hiring a coach and general manager. I don't pretend to know everything about hiring a coach and general manager. I can tell you that when you hire a retread offensive coordinator who has not been successful anywhere he went, that's probably a bad idea. I could tell you that hiring Adam Gase was a very obviously bad idea the moment he did it. I can say that hiring Mike McCagnon was very clearly a bad idea from the moment he did it. Those are just some examples. John Idzik. But again, most organizations that turn around their fortunes do so because I got an email from a fan the other day saying that the big 3 in football are coach, general manager, and quarterback. I, in an article the other day, said coach and quarterback. You need to have the right infrastructure in place. How have the Eagles been able to turn over, and more often than not, are at least a playoff team? I know that they're falling apart now, and Nick Sirianni's on the hot seat and will probably be fired. But how do they manage to seemingly always come back? Because Howie Roseman is a really good general manager. That's why hiring Joe Douglas seemed like a good idea. He comes from Philadelphia, comes from Baltimore. Seemed like a great idea. Just didn't work. And don't give me the built a winning roster garbage. He's like the only GM in the history of the NFL that's been given a 5th year with that kind of record. Most GMs who take over are taking over dysfunctional organizations with a lack of talent on the roster. Yeah, sometimes you have like a GM being fired on a team that just can't get over the hump. But many, many teams that fire a GM are firing it because their team is completely barren of talent. And teams that turn it around have GMs that make savvy decisions and within a few years have the team at least looking respectable again. The Detroit Lions are Exhibit A. He gets too involved in the sport he doesn't know anything about. I don't even know if it's that necessarily. I think it's just like you got to get the right people in place and then leave them alone. Forget about the leaving them alone part. He just can't get the right people in place. What he should do is look at what consistently good teams do. Steelers, Ravens, Patriots. They believe in patience, a team culture, and don't listen to the outside. I don't think it's just that. Yeah, team culture definitely matters. But the team culture is going to come from hiring the right coach. Jets haven't done that. People just want someone to blame or lash out at. Sometimes it's nobody's fault. Sometimes you're just not as good as the other team when you're playing backups in the secondary. You don't need to blame one individual person to just shrug your shoulders and say they lost that game because of injuries. They're healthy enough on the offensive line. Jets didn't lose because Jake Hansen was in the game. Bad hiring. That's what I keep saying. Oh, what do you want Woody to do? Find a better hire. It is not my job to tell Woody Johnson how to do his job, as much as I want to do that. When it comes to hiring, as much as it's a toss-up, you're the one doing it. You're the one who meets these people. You need to either find a better way to hire or find better people in your organization who know how to hire. Find a genuine culture-building coach, stick with them, stay with the vision. Stick with them. He stuck with Saleh through a lot more than he should have. There was reason to fire Saleh after his 2nd year. Certainly should have been fired after last season. I don't even know how the Jets are going to get a coach with the Rodgers mess. Who would want to come to a team like this? Maybe that's the problem. They're just so bad no one wants to come. No one wants to deal with Woody Johnson. I don't know. Future looks bleak. Devontae's a better tackle. 100%. Did you see Devontae Adams on that pick? So I should take lessons from Devontae Adams. And some of the other Jets should too, with the effort that they put in on their tackling. Give Devontae a lot of credit for that. I want an owner who listens to fans and is open to try new things. I do not want an owner who listens to fans. If fans ran the Jets, we would be in worse shape than we are now. Open to try new things? Yes. Listens to fans? Absolutely not. Why is your headline, "It's over"? Not very optimistic and pretty depressing. It's my prerogative to put whatever I want on a podcast, but it reflected no less than exactly what I think, I feel. I think a lot of Jets fans think and feel. It is not my job to be endlessly optimistic. It's not my job to be endlessly pessimistic either. But I don't think this is being endlessly pessimistic. I've conceded multiple times that it's not really over. Jets have a 33% chance of making the playoffs, roughly. That's not nothing. It's not zero. Perhaps it'll go up a bit if they beat the Patriots. But again, it's not my job. Nor would I want to, honestly. Would I want to sit there and go, yeah, rah, rah, we're still in it? No. You're looking at someone who predicted the Jets would win the Super Bowl. That's how optimistic I was about this team. Listening to the fans is the worst thing an owner can do because the fans are not some unified entity that knows what to do. The fans are emotional and reactionary, exactly like Woody himself. Said it very well. It never ends. Our kicker suddenly stinks. Calling it suddenly is interesting because as much as Greg Zuerlein had a great year last year, what Jets fans didn't realize that he was below average the year before. He just wasn't totally incompetent like Jets kickers had been until then. So Jets fans hailed him like the second coming of the Messiah. But he was not that great. When the Jets got him, he was coming off a terrible season in Dallas. He's been a below average kicker for most of his career. The minute he knuckled those 2 kicks in the preseason, Jets should have known that they had to keep a second kicker. I know that sounds ridiculous. But Zuerlein has a history that when he misses kicks in the preseason, it carries over to the regular season. And when kickers get the yips, they do not usually get back from them. I've seen this already with Jets too many times. My first year as a Jets fan was in 2004. Doug Bryan. Saw it with Mike Nugent in his rookie year. That it's happening all at once is insane. My son's same age, same problem. He goes to games with me and has never known a playoff appearance. So sad. Exactly. I have kids. My husband's not a sports fan. And I think the greatest kindness I can do for them, is not to get them caught up in Jets fandom. May end up happening anyway because it's what I do. So they could get interested in it. I watch a lot of football. Very interested in the sport as a whole. Play fantasy football. But it may just be the biggest kindness I can do to them because it's caused me so much aggravation in my life over something that ultimately in the grand scheme of things doesn't really matter. In a weird way, people actually like being pessimistic. I don't think sadistic is the right word. I think masochistic is what you're talking about. But I saw a quote once. I don't remember exactly. I don't know if it comes from somewhere or if it. By the way, I'm sorry. I see I missed a super chat. I will get to it as soon as I finish with this one. There was a quote that I saw, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but they said people think that the point of sports is to be happy, and is to be happy. They said the point of sports is not to be happy. The point of sports is to be sad in a group. It really reads very well when you're a Jets fan. Being sad in a group. The hard part is when you're sad and you're in a group of non-Jets fans. Then you just feel like you want to wear a paper bag over your head. Jets fan in hiding. Hence the icon, the image, the thumbnail for this podcast. Yeah, we're done. Allow me a weird question. I'm a Brit, by the way. What accent is that? That's actually a funny question because I've been asked that many times, and I don't know exactly where it comes from because I'm Brooklyn born and bred, and so are my parents. And so I don't know. I've been asked it by many different people in different places. People from Britain, people from South Africa have asked me that. I don't know. Maybe I cut off my R's a bit, and so people think that I'm British or that I don't. Like, I've been asked so many times, you're not from Brooklyn, are you? I'm like, yeah. Like, are your parents from Brooklyn? Yeah. The extent I could say is my father was born in Connecticut and lived there till he was 4 years old. I don't know. Maybe it comes from there. I don't think it sounds like Connecticut. I don't know if Connecticut sounds so different from Brooklyn. We're going to be a very scary offense soon. We have weapons everywhere. Look, you can hope. After that New England game, I certainly hoped so. We'll see what happens with ABT. I don't think we've heard anything. You can hope that things will turn around, but there's no reason to believe so after 7 games. We have the talent to beat any team in the league. Have some pride in the name of the front of the jersey, Rex. I mean, it reminds me of what Herb Brooks said in Miracle, right? In the movie about the 1980 U.S. Olympic team that beat the USSR. And when Herb Brooks said, I don't know if he actually said this to the team, but it's definitely in the movie where he said to them, when you get through your head that the name on the front means more than the name on the back, right? He kept asking them, what's your name? Who do you play for? And they kept saying they play for whatever college they came from. And finally, Michael Ruzioni says, I play for the United States of America. And that's one thing the Jets need to embrace, definitely. But talent isn't enough, especially when some of that talent was old and is clearly hitting an age wall. But even so, talent is not enough in this league. Coaching matters a lot. Just ask Sam Darnold and Geno Smith. If there's no reason to believe anything and they completely suck and they don't have a chance, why are we here? Well, a few things. First of all, as I said so many times, they still have a 33% chance of making the playoffs. So sorry, I still forgot to get to the super chat. I'm going to open it up here. They have it's not completely over, but any realistic fan knows that it's unlikely. And let me ask you something else. Did you listen or watch podcasts last year when the Jets were 5-8? Did you watch or listen to podcasts 2 years ago when they were in midst of their season-ending 6-game losing streak? Did you watch them in 2021? Did you watch them under Adam Gase? Did you watch them in the most of Todd Bowles' tenure? Did you watch them at the end of the Rex era? Did you watch them in Eric Mangini's? Did you watch them in 2007? Did you watch them in 2005? That's as far back as I go. 2004 was my first year as a full-time fan. I watched them a few years before that, but I didn't really understand. If you watch podcasts and you consume content until then, I'm sure it was very pessimistic. I mean, what else could it have been? I'm talking about teams that were among the worst in the NFL year in and year out. And as I said at the top, I wasn't really planning on doing a podcast today, except that I was essentially asked if I was, and that kind of made me decide to do it. How about a smile, Rivka? You're way too pretty to look so somber. The Jets aren't worth the heartache. I don't disagree. The Jets definitely are not worth the heartache. What have they ever done for me, except giving me heartache? To an extent, the somber tone that I've taken in this podcast is an act. It's not really usually how I act. I think my tones are maybe a little bit more like an octave lower than I normally am. It's kind of to make a broader point. And if you make me smile, I'll smile. One feels that we don't have a team yet. I also wonder about what would have happened at Pittsburgh if that interception hadn't happened. I guess this is what happens when you support a team like these Jets. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, look, the momentum, as much as people like statisticians disavow it or say it doesn't exist, it definitely does. To some extent. If the Jets had kept that ball, if they had gone down and scored, game might have been over. We'll never know. So the head coach we have now is permanent. What about the offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, permanent as well? I don't think so. If the Jets finish the season under 500, Elbrick and everyone else will be gone. I mean, theoretically, they could keep Elbrick as the defensive coordinator. I doubt that will happen. OC definitely isn't permanent. He's going to get fired. I mean, look, I can't say for sure. Woody can do whatever he wants, but that's my assumption. What's going on with Wilson, by the way? Dude looks depressed and angry, and something between him and Rodgers is off. I don't know. You know, I had said before the year that if the Jets didn't win this season, weren't decent, Garrett was going to ask for a trade, but I don't even know if the Jets will be able to trade him for anything much the way he's been playing. The streak starts this Sunday. Got to believe. Oh, by the way, just before I go back, Greasers, thanks for the super chat. I really appreciate it. The streak starts this Sunday. I got to believe. We just signed Grimace. Let's go, Jets. Look, I mean, the Mets had their run. It was fun. It ended, obviously. We have a lot of fond memories. I have fond memories from those 2009-10 Jets teams. I have fond memories from the Mets in 2006. and in 2015, and now this year. There's just, you can always hope. As a Jets fan, you have to hope. You have no choice. But the chances of it actually happening are just not very high. Jets are great. Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Hassan Reddick. We are unstoppable. Imagine what those names would have looked like 3 years ago. People are saying the Bills got Kupp. I'm not seeing anything about that. I've seen that the Rams are trying to trade Cooper Kupp for a second-round pick. I doubt Buffalo would give away another draft pick after they traded for Amari Cooper, but I could be wrong. We'll see where Kupp goes. Hopefully he stays in the NFC. Here's a question. Are us fans to blame at all? Do we ever manifest positivity? Mathematically, does it matter if the fan base is positive? I mean, look, if you're at a game, you're generally going to cheer. First of all, I've been to one Jet game in my life, so I don't think I have any impact on how the players play. And if I do, that's just sad. But I don't think it matters. Look, fan bases are positive when the team is good, and they're negative when the team is bad. I don't think the Jets fans are usually negative when their team is performing really well. Yes, I know that when they had a good record under Zach Wilson, Jets fans were still negative, but that was because their play on the field did not match their record. When the Jets were 8-3 under Favre, Jets fans were not negative. When the Jets went 11-5 in 2010, Jets fans were not negative. Even when the Jets were in the midst of that 5-game winning streak in 2015, Jets fans were not negative for the most part. I think trying to read into how the fan base's reactions affect sports players is a little bit much. Now, we know that the Jets players pay way too much attention to what people are saying about them. I mean, case in point, what Sauce Gardner responded to my article on Twitter. But I don't think, first of all, I think in terms of manifesting positivity, it's the Jets and their coach's job to manifest positivity within the locker room. It's not fans' jobs to coddle them. Now, the difference between Jets fans and Eagles fans is that Eagles fans boo their team even when their team is good. We're in New York. There are expectations. Fine, New Jersey. I'm in New Jersey. In this market, there are expectations. And if you're not meeting them, you're going to get booed and you're going to get criticized. These are adults. It's their job to be able to tune out the noise around them. And if they can't, they shouldn't be in the NFL. I'm a troll, but I'm not talking about being at the game. I'm talking about YouTube and social media. Those young players read it. Sauce deleted Twitter because we're so negative. Sauce deleted Twitter because I'm so negative. I would like to take credit for that. Sauce Gardner deleted his Twitter app because I wrote an article saying Breece Hall should be benched. He said so himself. Anyways, if the Jets players are consuming too much content about themselves, that is up to their coaches to tell them to shut it. And it is up to them as players to stop it. Even Zach Wilson, the one smart thing he ever did was deleted all social media from his phone. If Zach Wilson knew that it was too much of a distraction for him, it shouldn't take Sauce Gardner so long to figure that out. It shouldn't take Garrett Wilson so long to figure that out. It shouldn't take Breece Hall so long to figure that out. They should not be responding to Jets X Factor articles or any other articles on Twitter. It's one of the things I always blame Saleh for. They couldn't stop his players from. Why do they care what we think? Especially me, some random writer. Are you all Jets X Factor employees even Jets fans? All y'all ever do is criticize everyone on the team every week. I can tell you every single writer at Jets X Factor is a Jets fan. And in fact, it is because we are Jets fans that we are so negative about the team, because the team has given us everything to be negative about. I admit it. As a fan, I've always been pessimistic. But I've also never seen a Jets team in my lifetime that was a favorite in anything. Even in 2009-10, they were underdogs. They had to make, playoff runs on the road. Can we just see one really good team? That's what this team was supposed to be this year. Hey, Rivka, don't know how you manage to talk about this team every week, but appreciate the analysis nonetheless. It's hard. I said I wasn't planning on doing a podcast this week. I was supposed to have Sam Monson on a few weeks ago. We had to cancel. And I haven't felt like talking to him since then. Because why should I have Sam Monson on talking about as negatively as I do? Sam Monson, formerly PFF, now Check the Mic podcast. I was supposed to have someone from Sports Info Solutions on. I don't need more data to tell me that the Jets stink. It's very hard. I agree that if I was Jets coach, I would say no to social media during the season. You don't think that there are a bunch of other head coaches around the NFL that are exhorting their players not to read it, not to look? Now, I have heard, I forgot who it was who said it. I think it was Mina Kimes from ESPN who said that that players, coaches are much more aware than they should be of what's being said about them. But again, it is not the responsibility of the masses to censor what they say about the team because of the feelings of the players and coaches. Besides which, even if we as Jet fans did not, or analysts did not bash them, there's a whole national media that is more than happy to annihilate Aaron Rodgers, whom they despise. And by the way, that's one of the hardest parts of this season, is having a target on your back when you haven't even won anything. Remember, those 09-10 teams were underdogs. To an extent, there were people who hated them because of Rex Ryan. But they did not have nearly as much of a target on their back as the Jets do because of Aaron Rodgers. And look, as someone who disliked Aaron Rodgers for a long time, long before I think most other people did, to me, early in his career, I saw him calling out his teammates, like what he did to Mike Williams last week. And I did not like that. I always hated Jake Delhomme and Phillip Rivers for the same reason. It's just something I really don't like, is consistently seeing quarterbacks place blame on their receivers and their offensive linemen rather than kind of shielding them. It's a leader's job to take responsibility and to take blame even where it may not 100% be warranted, particularly the quarterback. But again, being a fan of a team that has Aaron Rodgers as leader when you don't like him yourself and you 100% understand why everyone dislikes him is very difficult. And therefore, even if Jets fans do not bash him, even if Jets fans were all silent and 100% supportive, I don't know about your YouTube feed. Mine is full of, until I deleted it, is like Stephen A. Smith and Mangini, and I'm just trying to think of all the names even. All the ESPN guys. I don't know, Damian Woody and Rex went off on Rodgers on the Jets and Rodgers this week. Ryan Fitzpatrick. List goes on and on and on. It would still be there. They kept Gibson on returns after he blew it on 2 kicks. Haven't seen that mentioned. The Jets have a surplus of ways of losing. The fact that Gibson was even on the team going into this year was ridiculous. I wrote an article at the end of last year basically talking about it. I wrote an article before this season showing how bad of a return he is, how much opportunity there was there to have big returns, and just how bad his vision is. And yet they keep Malachi Corley inactive. And again, I'm not saying Malachi Corley is very good. He was not my number one choice of receiver in the 3rd round. Be interesting to see how Jalen McMillan does with Chris Godwin and what's his name out? Mike Evans, because McMillan was a 3rd round pick. But it's just, as you said, surplus of ways of losing. It never ends. The Jets have been been garbage in the last decade. How can you not be pessimistic? You said it for me. So they get paid millions of dollars to play a game that's not enough. We're not allowed to use freedom of speech now because it might hurt their feelings. Exactly. I still love the Jets. I'm going to love the losses. I'm going to love the fumble, the fake spike, the missed ball, the fail Mary. I'm going to love the bad uniforms, the fact that they have no stadium. Okay. It's definitely your prerogative to do so. Fans make terrible decisions. Every fan I know wanted Aaron Rodgers. Every fan I know wanted Zach Wilson. Every fan wanted Sam Darnold. Wilson and Darnold, yes. Rodgers, no, not at all. That's revisionist history. The fan base was very evenly split. A lot of people wanted Derek Carr. People were very upset when Derek Carr signed with the Saints. I was torn between the two. I kept going back and forth. I don't know. I can't say now that one or the other would have been better. The only reason I could say that Carr would have been better is because they would not have mortgaged their future as much. And they probably wouldn't have hired Nathaniel Hackett as their offensive coordinator. But the fan base was definitely split on that. I'm not saying that Woody should have listened. I'm just saying that there was a very vociferous argument going on. Thanks for the super chat. Two cannibals side by side eating a clown. One looks at the other and says, "Does this taste funny to you?" And Gibson stinks. Okay, you said you were trying to make me. I said to try to make me laugh, so you did. Keep coming with the corny jokes. Super chats are very much appreciated, but never necessary. I'm just saying that because that's a lot of money to give. But thank you. I love the Jets and all their horribleness. You know, my grandfather feels the same way. My grandfather's the one who made me a Jets fan. I've said this many times. My mother's father, Jets fan since they were the Titans. He always says he sticks with them through thick and through thin, watches them even when they're 3-12. I just don't have the same kind of, I don't know whether you call it emotional fortitude, patience, whatever you want to call it. I like seeing good football. When there isn't good football going on with the Jets, I'll watch them because it's my job. But I'd much rather watch the Lions and the Vikings. Not to say that was perfect. There was a lot of sloppiness in that game, but it was a fun game. Packers and Texans. Fun game to watch. You watch the Super Bowl. You watch the Chiefs go through the playoffs. You watch these different games and these different teams. So much more enjoyable than watching the Jets. If you can't handle criticism, I guess don't go looking for it on Twitter. I mean, look, I say this outright. I don't have access to Twitter, to X. I have a Twitter account. I have a family member who tweets out some of my articles. That's it. I don't have access to the account. I don't see anything anyone writes on Twitter. Maybe I can Google the first few things. So sometimes I see what Adam Schefter says on Twitter. That's about it. I don't try to read YouTube comments anymore. I get emails sometimes from fans. I only respond to the ones that make sense. You can criticize me. That's fine. Just do it respectfully. And if it's a reasonable criticism, even if it's not reasonable criticism, you're entitled to your opinion. But if it's well thought out, I will respond. If it's not a personal attack, I'll respond. But yeah, I mean, look, I don't go looking for criticism on Twitter. I know it's there. I'm sure when Sauce called me out that the responses were hateful. I stopped going on most YouTubers' streams because I got completely destroyed on one of them. It's not in human nature. Most people, at some point, attacks are going to get to you. And so why would you seek them out? I just don't think much can change this season, given how our coaching brass was handpicked by Saleh. I mean, yeah, it's a big problem. It's one of the reasons Woody should have fired Saleh last year. Now, Nate Hackett still would have been there, which would have been, I mean, was a huge problem in of itself. But at least if he had fired Saleh, he could have gotten a new quarterbacks coach, a new offensive lines coach. Ulbrich, you could say stay or go. Jets had been successful on their defense. I don't love the defensive scheme. I still think he did a good job. Fine. But on the offense, at least they would have had a better quarterbacks coach, a better a better offensive line coach, a better pipeline to replace Hackett as a play caller if need be. Things could have been different. And honestly, I should have just said to Rodgers, sorry, you can't have everything you want. Hackett is gone. That's what an owner with more fortitude would say. But yeah, the coaching is just a major issue. Also, if leaders say we when praising, say me when blaming. In private, they hold others accountable. In public, the buck stops with them. That's why they're leaders. Look, I don't necessarily blame Salah for being that way. Salah was like almost to an incredible extent that way. He very rarely criticized his players in public, and he would defend them to an almost absurd level. The bigger issue I had with Salah was that there was no sign that there was any accountability in private. But yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the many reasons people despise Rodgers. It's just he cannot hold himself accountable ever, and he won't ever take flack for anyone else. I became a fan sitting next to my dad and watching Super Bowl III. I said, Dad, why are you rooting for the Jets? He said, I always root for the underdog. 50 years later, still underdogs. Love it. I mean, it would be nice to be a favorite once. I love the Jets because they suck. You know, that's a special level of, I don't know if it's reverse psychology or what you want to call it. It would be a very interesting psychological study. Aaron Rodgers' foot is definitely squarely in his mouth right now, and everyone who bent over backwards to defend him from his haters looks stupid. Yeah, I mean, 100%. I don't know if you guys noticed, by the way, I try to avoid profanity in general. Yeah, Twitter is a cesspool. The combo of beat writers who feel like they have to give their opinion, and Jets content creators outside of JetX who have no idea what they're talking about. Well, I appreciate you excluding JetX from that group. Look, social media is a cesspool. The biggest issue with it is when you're talking to a screen, you feel a lot of freedom to say things that you would never say to someone's face. Not to say that people can't be nasty to each other's faces too, but people are a lot more civil in person. When you're talking on social media, even if you have someone's name, but especially if you don't have their name, I mean, people can be brutal. And so it is the job of every person, it is the job of every person, but particularly someone in sports, to recognize that and to insulate themselves from it. Yeah, it's not going to rub to just slide off their backs. Very few of us are Teflon. But again, avoid it as much as you can. It is possible to do that. Delete social media. Make your TikTok and YouTube and whatever other things you're on feeds. Delete anything that shows up in it that has to do with you or your team or football altogether. You can stay away from a lot of it. Yes, you'll still hear the questions. You'll still hear from your teammates, things like that. But it is not impossible to stay away from what people say about you. And if you can't handle it, if you can't handle it, you have to stay away from it. And I don't expect them to be able to handle it. Sauce Gardner is 23, 24 years old? I can't imagine handling that kind of thing at 23, 24 years old. Just being a Jets X Factor writer and getting the criticism that I get is very difficult. I can't imagine doing that, but that's why you don't expose yourself to it. And again, it's not the media's job or anyone else's job to stop criticizing because of the feelings of the players. JetX has taught me what cover 2 is. Thank you. Anytime. Twitter's taught me what cover 2 is. Thanks for that, at least. So is it JetX or is it Twitter, or JetX is Twitter? Schematically, one concerning thing about the other night was the Jets' dependence on man coverage. Steelers went to stacks, bunches, and beat it in the second half. The Jets don't really have an answer. I mean, they haven't had an answer for it all season. The Jets, 2 years ago, they didn't really run as much man. Last year, they increased it, and this year they've continued to run a lot of man. Last year, they didn't have the same issues of communication. They would banjo coverage, and they did it effectively. This year, consistently, we've seen it every week where someone's running into someone else and causing a big play. It's definitely an issue, and the Jets just don't seem to be able to adjust because they're so married to their scheme. Firing Salah 5 weeks in didn't do anything positive. It made the defense worse. It made the planning more chaotic and demoralized the team. Totally an offseason move. It should have happened last offseason. Now, in terms of doing it in the middle of the year, I think it was a desperation move. Personally, I liked it just because I was sick and tired of the same old stuff with Salah. Did I think it was going to work? I thought it might. Didn't. I don't think the defense is worse because Salah's not here. Ulbrich called the plays. Ulbrich continues to call the plays. The schematics are the same. The adjustments are the same. I don't think that. I think that's a okay. I don't want to say that it's a lazy way to think, but I do think it's a somewhat shallow analysis of what's going on. Any woman who actually knows football and has the courage to talk about it in public is going to attract the wrath of the incels. Must really suck. That's why I don't expose myself to it. For a while I did. Not on Twitter. I never really had Twitter access, but and actually the truth is I still am on the Jets X Factor Discord. And not the Jets Discord. I left it a couple of times. Probably should still. I like talking football. But yeah, I used to go on Jets YouTuber channels after a 15-minute rant about me that included, yes, a reference to the fact that I'm a woman, to put it mildly. I finally realized I can't do it. Even if there's benefit for me personally with it, even if I enjoy it, it's just not worth the downside. Yeah, if you can't handle the nastiness, delete social media. It's just a life lesson. It's not. I mean, again, it's particularly in sports, but yeah. I think Salah learned too hard on the Navy SEALs analogy. He drafts mature players, but thinks that they're mature, and he doesn't need to make them accountable. I don't know if that was it. I think Salah was just the players liked him too much. He was too soft on them. But that's the least of the issues with Salah. Accountability is one of the big issues, but I mean, schematically, it was just a disaster. Yeah, but now Brick has a ton more on his plate. He can't put as much time and effort into the defense. There's no way, only so many hours in the day. Perhaps, but there are many other defensive head coaches who call their defenses. Sean McDermott doesn't. And so it's not, and many head coaches who call plays. And so I don't think that that's enough of an excuse. I'm okay with Twitter, but yeah, concision, as opposed to conciseness, is an enemy of detail and facilitates reactions based on emotions, and malice is easier to lean on than empathy or something again. Exactly. And I'm not saying I'm immune to it. I mean, look, in the Jets Discord, you can ask anyone who's there. I've probably been nasty on there at times. Anyone who's honest with themselves knows that at some point or other they've been at least tempted, if not outright have done it, to be uncivil on social media. It's hard not to. It's human nature. You're talking to a computer. Emotions run high. Again, right? Character limit. You have to get things out quickly. Want to get likes. It all is just one big wrecking ball. I just invented a time machine. Let's Jets go 11-6, playoff run, and Super Bowl berth. Not sure if we win. Keep believing. It will be like asking you to do a cooking show right now at the same time and expecting there to be no loss in your football analysis. Again, it is not an apt description because there are many head coaches in the NFL who call plays. The only reason it is apt to an extent is because he has to balance his new duties with calling plays. But again, there have been other interim head coaches who also called plays. So I don't think it's an entirely good analysis. The Jets are playing their scheme the same. See, this is the thing about the Jets defense also. They've been married to their scheme all along. And so basically, if you have elite talent to play with the scheme, you have a great four-man rush, then the scheme works. If you don't have it, it doesn't work. And what we're seeing this year to a large extent is what happens when you don't have that elite pass rushing talent. And now what we saw this last week was what happens when your secondary is decimated also. Remember when Annie was getting picked on by one of the Jets content aggregators? Good stuff. I mean, I did too last week. I only know about it because someone showed it to me. I found it amusing, to be honest. Note that when Salter tried to hold Rodgers accountable by finding him for blowing off minicamp, Rodgers responded by criticizing him on McAfee. It's a Rodgers issue. Why do you say 30%, but other analytics sites say we have a 47% chance of making the playoffs? Because 47% is ESPN analytics, which is an outlier, and because 47% does not make sense to the naked eye. I suspect that they may be still going based on preseason expectations rather than adjusting for in-season. Because, again, the betting lines say 32%. NFL.com's simulator says 34%. That is far more just, again, I'm an analytics person, but I also use common sense. And your common sense tells you that there is not a 47% chance the Jets are going to make the playoffs. Yeah, but they were already head coaches, not being head coaches and defensive coordinators all of a sudden. No, look, it's a fair thing, but again, I don't think we're seeing it because, again, what you're seeing from Ulbrich is the same thing you saw in the past. Nothing has really changed in terms of the Jets' defensive play calling. What they're doing schematically is what they've always done. The thing about Jeff Ulbrich and Robert Saleh, their scheme and the way their principles are basically we are going to run a completely vanilla scheme and we are going to dare you to beat us. We think we're better than you. The thing is, the last 2 years, the Jets were largely better, particularly because they had an elite pass rush and elite coverage. When the pass rush isn't getting there, you already see the cracks. When the secondary is decimated, it falls apart, like in 2021. There are many head coaches in the NFL who call plays, but the problem is asking him to be interim out of the blue. Plus, he's never been a head coach before. McDermott only became play calling last year. Okay, again, I would concede, but then I'm just consider my other point, which I said, which is that Ulbrich hasn't really changed anything. It's not like he's suddenly doing something different or there's something less. He's doing the same exact thing he's always done. He's just seeing less success with it. I don't think that has to do with firing Saleh, to be honest. It was the same guy who picked on you too. Yep. It's like trying to be the mechanic of a shop and be the shop manager just all of a sudden out of the blue because you're a really good mechanic doesn't really mean you're a really good shop manager. I would say that more about his head coaching skills than his coordinating skills, though, to just use your analogy. He could still be a really good mechanic even while he manages the shop. But again, if you look back, the crux of the matter, I would like to, if you're going to respond to what I said about Ulbrich, that nothing has materially changed in terms of the way he's calling the defense. They're doing it the same. He's doing the same thing he always does. He did. He's just not getting the same results, particularly against Pittsburgh. And the Jets defense has shown its cracks before also. Rodgers lost 5 straight in the first half of 2022, lost the closer to make the playoffs, 30 straight under 300 he's washed. I mean, look, they did in the first half of 2022, they did ultimately come back within one game of the playoffs. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but at this point, he is at best a bottom 10 quarterback in the NFL. I think calling him anything more than that is disingenuous and looking at history rather than the present. Okay, Freedom House, I'm not going to keep reading the comments because I want you to respond specifically to what I said about the fact that nothing has changed except the results. Meaning nothing has materially changed in the way the Jets, Ulbrich is calling games and the way the Jets are preparing for games. They're coming out the same way they always did. They're running the same defense as they always did. They're just not getting the same results. That has nothing to do with firing Saleh. Not sure if this was covered. Got here late, but we should be playing all over Smith. So I don't think I actually said it. I was thinking it. I was talking about how Tyron is washed. Definitely should be playing all over Smith at this point for no other reason than to get Ola some experience. It's not even that Ola's going to be good. I don't know. He didn't look good on the right side at all. But just let him play somewhat. Even if he's worse than Tyron, what do you have to lose? And so that's my take on it. I appreciate it, Barney. It's hard not to let the trolls get to you, which is why I don't tolerate so many trolls. I'm sorry if that makes me thin-skinned. I own up to it. I'm thin-skinned. It's my prerogative to be thin-skinned. On our interior D-line, who do we put out there? Is Leonard Taylor a better option than Kinlaw or Fotu? I was actually just going to say that, and I may even write it. I think at this point, Kinlaw's on a one-year deal, Fotu's on a one-year deal. Your defense stinks anyway, at least in pass rushing. You can't defend the run to save your life. Fotu was a ridiculous signing. You might as well play Leonard Taylor as a starter. Then they would never do it, but they should. Agree that his defensive scheme needs to adjust. However, possibly it's difficult to make those adjustments as a DC if he's also juggling head coaching responsibilities. Could make the schemes vanilla. See, this is one thing Jets fans have to understand. Robbie Sable has been saying this on Twitter a long time. The Jets scheme is the most vanilla scheme in the NFL and has always been. Robert Saleh ran the same scheme in San Francisco. It is an extremely vanilla scheme that says we are going to rush 4, we are going to play the same coverage, the same basic coverages, and we are going to dare you to beat us because we think we are better than you. Legion of Boom ran the same scheme. When you are actually better than the other team, it works great and the coach gets a ton of credit, right? Jets the last couple of years. Elite talent on the defense. Legion of Boom. 49ers defense, elite talent. When you don't have that talent, you don't have, which the linchpin of it is the coverage and the pass rush. When you don't have one of those two things, there goes the scheme. Ulbrich and Saleh have less capacity to compensate for a lack of talent than virtually any other defensive scheme that exists in the NFL. Yes, the Jets have tried to blitz more often because they recognize that they have no pass rush, and it has compromised their coverage, and they just haven't gotten home, which is I don't know if it's on Ulbricht's blitzes. I don't know if it's on the players. It's on both. But Ulbricht's scheme in particular, like there are other defenses that because they use misdirection and then confusion. Think of Wink Martindale. I know the Giants' defenses were terrible, but when he was with the Ravens, he's a crazy blitzer. But the thing is, because you don't know where the blitzers are coming from, and you can still get away with it. How did Rex get away with it? Yes, I know they had Darrelle Revis, but if you looked at the rest of the talent on that defense, it was not elite. They did not have much of a pass rush other than blitzing. And yet Rex was able to get away with it to a large extent because offenses never knew where it was coming from. They didn't know what crazy thing he was going to do next. Personally, drove me crazy. I'm not a big fan of blitzing, but I recognize that there is a place in the NFL, particularly when you do not have the defensive talent, to use your scheme to confuse the offense. And that is something that Jeff Ulbrich and Robert Saleh do not philosophically believe in. They believe in playing vanilla. They don't switch their cornerback sides because they say it'll ruin communication. They play a one-gap defense, penetrating, and never really ask anyone to two-gap or even 1.5 gap because they believe in everyone just being able to go upfield and not think. Saleh even said it outright. He doesn't want his players to think. And so the vanilla-ness of the scheme has nothing to do with going from Saleh to Ulbrich, and it has everything to do with what the scheme does. And by the way, also you should recognize Ulbrich has made adjustments, and he made adjustments against Pittsburgh just as he did every other week, and they just didn't work. I mean, if you notice against Buffalo, they gave up 3 points in the second half. So they did adjust. Against Pittsburgh, those adjustments didn't work. And you could say in part it was definitely because of the injuries. They just struggled before the injuries too. Freedom, you're ignoring the chief point that I made. I was quite jolly when we signed Rodgers, bought a Rodgers jersey some 30 minutes after confirmation, although I want the bloke who went to New Orleans. I guess I fell for what Rodgers was some 2 or 3 years ago. Look, a lot of Jets fans did. I was on the fence about it for a long time. Ultimately, I think I talked myself into thinking that Rodgers was the better idea. I thought that they were both very risky options. I tend to be, in terms of like making moves, I tend to be more conservative than bold. Meaning, for example, I preferred the Tristan Wirfs pick over Mekhi Becton because I thought Wirfs was a safer pick. I preferred to keep Sam Darnold and trade down and get a team around him rather than drafting Zach Wilson because I thought no quarterback would succeed in the Jets with the Jets' terrible offensive infrastructure. There are a lot of those kinds of moves that I prefer. I tend to be, again, I'm not like, when it comes to that, I am more conservative. But, again, there was a very big fight in the fan base about it. It was not a clear-cut move. Super fair and don't disagree. The AFC is so mangled. Aaron is still capable of 7 wins out of 10. 9 and 7 might get a wild card and tiebreaker. You mean 9 and 8. But also, I am not so certain Rodgers is capable. It's possible, but I don't think you can say that based on what we've seen this season. Because it's not just about him not being on the same page as his receivers. His accuracy has been terrible for the most part, and his decision-making has been off. So many times you have open receivers and he doesn't pull the trigger. He's also just flat-out missed open receivers. Again, it's not all on Rodgers. It's on the offense as a unit. It's on the team as a unit. But I don't know if Rodgers has 7 wins in him. I'm not. Again, you're still not responding to my core point. My core point is that the Jets Ulbrich is not doing anything different defensively than he did until now. He is just getting different results. Nothing to do with anything else he has to do. He is doing the same exact thing he always did. Start Tyrod and Olu fashion, and a message must be sent. Tyrod would be ridiculous. Olu, I agree with. Still not responding to my point. McDonald Q question mark and Reddick. It should be Leonard Taylor. The good thing is Reddick coming back means no Clemens, right? First of all, Ulbrich said that Reddick is only going to be a passing down player for now, which means we will see plenty of Clemens. Second of all, Clemens played 35% of their snaps last year, which means we will still see plenty of Clemens, unfortunately. Is it a 4-2-5? Essentially, meaning the Jets play a base 4-3, but because nickel is the by far the most commonly used package in the NFL, the Jets are essentially a 4-2-5 defense. The thing is, I think they played 4-3 more often. I haven't actually checked it. I think they played a lot more 4-3 against Pittsburgh, probably because Pittsburgh was coming out in 12 personnel a lot. But yeah, in general, in the NFL, nickel is the most commonly used package. They did not get a whole new defensive scheme. My point is that he is not doing anything differently. He is keeping the scheme exactly the same. He's calling the plays exactly the same way that he always did. Nothing has changed. He is calling the exact same defense in the exact same way. The only thing that has changed is that the defense is not executing the same way that they did. You could say that it could affect it, but that is not the most likely reason that their defense fell apart. First of all, their defense was very shaky for a lot of this season. I don't care what the results say. They were very shaky. And yes, when you play a vanilla scheme and you have injuries, it is going to kill you much more than it will kill a team that has a scheme that is more equipped to handle lesser defensive talent. That is just a reality. Steve Spagnuolo, even, again, I know the Chiefs' defense was not good before last year, but again, he is acknowledged as a very good defensive coordinator because he has gotten a lot out of very non-talented defenses. If it's 4-2-5, Reddick will improve that scheme as a rushing linebacker? No. It's not. In a 3-4, that's when Reddick would be a rushing linebacker because you have the 3 defensive linemen, you have the 2 edge rushers. So a lot of times either you rush 5 or you drop at least one of the edge rushers. He's not going to be a dropping as a rushing linebacker. Technically, his position is linebacker because the Jets changed it because they basically changed all their defensive ends to linebackers so that Jermaine Johnson could keep number 11. So now that it messes up with trying to figure out. But 4-2-5 just means Reddick and McDonald are going to do what the Jets have done with their edge rushers until now. Sign John Gruden in the offseason and have him bring in his whole staff. Don't know about that one. You should just know that Ulbrich blitzed a lot against Pittsburgh. It just didn't work. He blitzed a lot in a few games this year and it just didn't work. Worked against the Patriots, hasn't worked since then. It allows you to play faster, but it also allows the offense to know exactly what you're going to do, which means that if you have a half creative play caller, they can beat it. There's a reason the Jets couldn't stop San Francisco or Miami. I wouldn't go that far. If you're going to bench Rodgers, you shouldn't have traded for Devontae Adams, which I kind of think they shouldn't have anyway. You should trade Hassan Reddick. You should trade basically every player on your team because you're tanking. Jets still in top 10 of dropback EPA and dropback success rate on defense per match quarters. They're not super elite, but not a terrible defense, especially against the pass. No, I don't disagree. This Pittsburgh game was the first game that they played poorly, and you could very much chalk it up to a lack of players. My main point is that I don't think Ulbrich has changed anything, and therefore chalking up the Pittsburgh game to having Ulbrich over Saleh is very, very disingenuous. I am much more inclined to blame injuries for it than I am to blame the change from Saleh to Ulbrich. He's not going to be a hybrid linebacker. If they drop Reddick into coverage, they're idiots. He's a terrible coverage guy. Unless the offense is scoring 40, our secondary and front four aren't going to cut it. Look, if you have a healthy secondary, it'll cut it. The front four, even with Reddick, I don't think it's going to help if Quinnen's not playing up to standard. It's not going to help if they can't get more production from their other defensive tackle. First of all, it was not a huge drop-off in performance against the Bills. Second of all, when you have DJ Reed down for half the game and you have DJ Reed, Michael Carter, Chuck Clark, and Tony Adams out for most of the game, I think you can attribute the downfall far more to that than to the change. I think it's disingenuous to say that. Now, do I think the Jets defense is good? No, I don't. I think it's very overrated. To an extent, I think it was overrated the last 2 years too because their run defense was not good. But I think, again, blaming the change from Saleh to Ulbrich for their defensive woes Remember, they struggled mightily in week 1 against San Francisco. Who was their head coach then? I think that's all I'm going to say on this topic, honestly, because I'm talking myself dry. We're going to agree to disagree. Rodgers is the greatest quarterback who ever lived. You guys are a bunch of woke haters who can't handle what a free thinker he is. Agreed. Reddick will put on a Jets jersey, and what generally happens when a free agent signing does that? Come on, now you know the answer. 100%. Not only that, Reddick is straight off the couch. More likely than not, it is more likely that he will suffer a soft tissue injury and hurt himself than he will come in and be an impactful player. Be analytical on this. If you want my personal takes, the season's over for the Jets. I think, again, realistic analysis says, can the Jets possibly make the playoffs? They can. Will they? It is very unlikely. I don't think that that's being pessimistic to say that. Saying it's over, maybe it was a little bit hyperbolic. To an extent, it was also an emotional thing rather than an analytical one. But again, that's my prerogative to do as a podcaster. Do you have anyone for head coach? I don't. But I really, really hope they do not hire one of these, retreads. Like, when you hear that a team, I remember I used to feel this way when I heard a team hired Doug Marrone. It was like, again? So that's really what I don't want. I don't understand why this team can't just play simple, basic football. Move the chains football. They can't do it. I mean, 100%. If they could just play simple, basic football, they would probably be at least 4-3 by now. I personally would pull a 2010 Randy Moss, move on from him again before the deadline, move Reddick and Quinn as well, rebuild. Moving Quinnen would be stupid. But personally, if they had not just traded for Devontae, I would have said to trade Reddick, to trade – I'm trying to think who else. Definitely Reddick. I might even say to trade DJ Reed. I would trade let's see. If AVT was healthy, I would even trade him. I know that sounds extreme, but I might do that. Not too many other players on the team you want to trade, but that's what I would do. I'm not blaming JD like others are. He's made logical moves, but some of them just don't work out. I'll tell you exactly what I blame JD for. I blame JD for the 2020-2021 drafts. 2022 was not able to undo the fact that he whiffed on a left tackle, he whiffed on a quarterback, and he whiffed on 2 receivers. I blame him for those. And almost every bad move that he made that came out of that came from those fundamental truths. The other thing I blame JD for, there are a few other things I blame JD for tremendously. I blame him for bringing in Rodgers and not doing anything else to fortify the team, particularly the offensive line. That is not revisionist history because I was slamming for him for that before it happened and while it happened. During that offseason, I had said the Jets need 2 new tackles. He got 0. Okay, you want to count Billy Turner as a new starting tackle. And I blame JD for that. I also blame him for not getting a competent backup last year, but the one thing I will say about that is there are rumors that Woody refused to pay for another one. If that's the case, I don't blame JD for it. The other thing I blame JD for is decimating their pass rush. Maybe it wasn't JD, maybe it was Saleh, but thinking that you can get rid of 3 of your top 4 pressure getters from last season and just move on without blinking an eye was ridiculous. I blame him most of all for what happened with Quentin Jefferson, replacing Quentin Jefferson with Kinlaw, and also for bringing in Fotu to replace Al Woods. Objectively speaking, those were tremendous downgrades. And he spent more money, far more money, double the amount of money on Kinlaw than he would have on Quentin Jefferson. I blame him very, very much for that. I have other things I blame him for, but those are things that I think are pretty much undeniable. Do we know anything? As far as I have not heard a word about AVT, I have not heard a word about DJ Reed. I am going to guess that I'm going to guess that all three of them are going to be out. If I had to guess, the fact that AVT was ruled out, the fact that Reed, just the way he was running, the fact that Michael Carter has injuries like all over the place, I'm going to guess all three of them are not going to play. You forgot to mention Tony Adams too. We could blitz if we had all our cornerbacks healthy, but not with Brandon Echols and Isaiah Oliver out there. So there were other games where Ulbrich tried to blitz and it just didn't work. Again, yes, if the cornerbacks are out there, if you have your healthy cornerbacks, and that was another point I made, again, you can blame the Pittsburgh game far more on the fact that they had, like, at one point, they had 4 of their 5 starting secondary guys out. So they were starting, they literally had Kendall Sheffield on the field, far more than anything to do with Saleh and Ulbrich. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know which original comment you're talking about. Go get Gruden. He has experience. I'm not a John Gruden fan. I think if the run game was much better, we'd be a much better team. But what is wrong with the run game? Many things. Probably started with Keith Carter because there's a communication issue there. We need people who know what winning is. I don't know. Is John Gruden, other than that one Super Bowl, is he really like associated with big time winning? It's amazing how a coach can, carry a reputation of winning one Super Bowl. Look at Doug Peterson. The offensive line is what's wrong with the run game. You have to have the holes in the run support to run the ball. I think it's a communication issue to a large extent because they have 4 very talented run blockers on the team. The fact that the tight ends also stink. I should mention that. Tight ends have been terrible in the run game. But a lot of it seems to be miscommunication. Aaron Glenn, but doubtful he'd come back knowing how what he is. Forget about that. I don't want another defensive head coach. I'm sick of it. I know Adam Gase was an offensive head coach. And I think Rich Kotite was an offensive head coach. Can we please get an offensive head coach for once? I got the feeling Tim Tebow was this. I don't believe in that. The only reason I mentioned Quinnen is there's a lot of teams with tackle playing close to him that you could get back with some draft capital. First of all, you don't want to trade Quinnen when his value is at its lowest. Second of all, they need Quinnen for the future. That would be ridiculous. Noah's going to come to head coach for us with Rodgers still at the helm. I don't know how you convince a good head coach to come to us. I can honestly see us keeping Ulbrich as head coach until Rodgers is gone. That's conceivably true. I asked Michael Nanny about this today, and he said they're probably going to end up hiring Vrabel or someone of that sort. My answer to this is twofold. Number one, you hope Rodgers retires. If he doesn't, you decline his option and take the $63 million cap hit. If you talk about having guts, Woody, show some guts. Do that. Decline his option. End the Rodgers experience. That's what they need to do. He has a $35 million option bonus as far as I understand. If they just decline it, he's a free agent. Hopefully he'll just retire. But did he whiff on Becton, or did injuries do him Becton from the start? I don't really care what happened exactly. Becton was a bad injury risk, but overall, Becton was a swing for the fences. Wirfs was widely considered the safer pick. That's the thing about Wirfs. Becton was a swing for upside. Wirfs was considered to have a much safer floor. When you took the guy who swung, you swung for upside and you whiffed, that's on you because you had an option to take the guy with a much safer floor. And ultimately, when it comes to the draft, we're driven by results. Do people give Douglas a free pass for Zach Wilson busting? Yes, a lot of people do because they say everyone else would have drafted him as well. I don't really care. Ultimately, if you're a GM, your track record goes by your drafting. And ultimately, those drafts were disastrous for the future of the Jets franchise. GMs have been fired for less than that. If Becton doesn't get hurt, what is he? I mean, I'm less optimistic than most. I didn't think he was as good as a rookie as other people did. But also, I think the injuries should have been a concern when a guy comes in at 364 pounds and was known to have been 395 when he was in college. And if you look it up, his coach in college literally had to get in his face for him to lose weight. If coaching is underutilizing talent or if JD is mishandling acquisitions, I always go back and forth. I think it's both. Ultimately, I've never been a fan of either guy. I know JD gets a free pass from the fan base. I've been very critical of both. I wanted to like JD. I was hoping I would like him. I thought he was the right hire, but I think he's made a lot of head-scratching decisions, even since then. Would you take Shane or JD at this point? JD. Shane is another one that I thought would be a good hire, and he's just been stuck in the mud. Well, yeah, that too. But Ben Johnson would be my pick for offensive-minded head coach, but there's no way he comes here to a garbage fire organization like us. Exactly. Yeah, but there's not supposed to be miscommunication on the offensive line 7 games into the season. What were these guys doing while training camp? Well, first of all, they rarely practiced together, if you recall. Moses was out, AVT, whatever. But besides that, again, cohesiveness on the offensive line has a lot to do with coaching. JD allowing Rodgers to hire Hackett and the rest of A-Rod's boys is what I blame JD for. Play can't have that kind of control and still respect the coaches. Look, it could have been Woody, but in that case, what does JD really do? You have a lot higher value of Quinnen than I do. I don't really think he's a 10-sack guy. Not close. That is if you care about sacks. That's a whole nother conversation for a whole different day. Fix the run game and we'll be okay. Yeah, but that's the big question. Your JD take is spot on. I'm sure most Jets fans disagree with me about JD. Anyway, I have been here for over 2 hours. Thank you for joining. I don't think this was probably particularly therapeutic because it was so negative, but I appreciate everyone who was here. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Subscribe to jetsxfactor.com, discount code 80, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I will probably be on next week because someone will guilt me into it. But thank you very much and have a good night.